Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. I am so excited for today's episode of Stranger Stitches. In just a second, you're going to see a bunch of words pop up on your screen. I'm going to need you to pause, take a screenshot, and print it up. You're going to need that checklist to complete today's project. We're going to be working on the crocheted version of the Doctor Who scarf. So grab your checklist and meet me right back here. Do you have your checklist? Let's talk a little bit about the checklist first. Yours is a little different from mine. Yours has a shopping list on the bottom that gives you all of the yarns that I bought. I use Super Saver because consistency and weight are very important in this project. Super Saver gets a bad name, but it's not really true anymore. It's not as rough, not as much sizing as it used to be made with. And once you wash it, it's smooth as anything. Also, the price point is right. So, what we got here is a checklist, and it's important to follow the checklist. This will get your colors on in the right order and in the right ratios. So, first thing we have is this number right here. That's going to be the amount of rows you put on in what color. So, it goes rows of that color, rows of that color. We're going to start with column 1, work our way down, begin again with column 2, work through that, start again with column 3, work your way through that. Now, when you get to the end here, measure your scarf. It was an original size of 12 feet. If you do not have 12 feet, do not worry, because this scarf saw a lot of modifications along the way. And here, if you're not at 12 feet, or you're not even close, begin again at column 1 and keep going again until your scarf reaches 12 feet. Other than that, there's not much to tell you about it. I use a 5mm hook, but you can use between a 4.5 or a 5.5. As long as you keep your stitches the same and keep your work consistent, it's all going to turn out just fine. So, enough ado, let's get started. All right, we are going to refer to our list. The first thing I need to do is make 3 rows of burgundy. I can do that. Leave yourself a little bit of tail. I'm going to show you a trick what to do with that. Make slip knot any old way you make them. Yarn in the hook. Make a couple of knots in this tail that we left, because when you're saving the planet, it is no good for your scarf to come apart. And I am going to chain 36. Got my 36. We're headed toward having a finished width of this project of 12 inches. And you might think that this ain't it. Well, you know, when you crochet into a foundation chain, it's going to stretch. So yeah, starting out with about 36 inches and 36 stitches and a 5mm hook is going to get you there. And all this pattern consists of is chain stitches and half doubles. Yarn over, skip a stitch, go into second from the hook, put your hook through there, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3. That's the half double. That's the only stitch you have to know for this entire pattern. We're going to half double all the way back across for a total of 35 stitches. But before we get to the end, I'm going to show you what I do with that little rat tail we left. I know y'all can hear my dog. Thank y'all for not fussing about him. It is way too hot to be outside this afternoon. It's like 104 Fahrenheit here, and I can't do it. He's a bulldog and he cannot be out in the heat. And I think I'm part bulldog too, because I can't take it. Are you a Doctor Who fan? Do you know someone who is? If you made this scarf for a Doctor Who fan in your life, they would lose their bloomin' minds. And after we get to the end of the tutorial on the pattern and the stitches, I'm going to give y'all a little bit of history so you will know why this scarf is so important to us. It's curling up a little bit. That's okay. It'll sort itself out. Okay, we're down here to the last few stitches. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how many you have left. We're going to lay that rat tail over our chain and continue our stitches as normal. That first one might be a little fiddly, but then after then it'll behave itself. Go over the tail, knots and all. So we've hidden our knots and our tail in there. Give it a little tug so you don't have any gaps at the end. And then you, with that knot in there and being crocheted over, you can pretty much clip this off. I have never had any trouble with it backing out. And if it does back out just a little bit, trim it off after you wash it. Chain one and turn. And you guessed it, friends, 35 half doubles back in the other direction. And you can use that little rat tail trick every time you change color. So 3 rows of half double in burgundy. So let me tell you how this scarf came to be. It's wild how a simple knitting mistake became one of the most iconic pieces of television history. And I have adapted it for us to crochet. Because it used to be only knitters. Thought that, yes, I know, knitter. They could make it, but we couldn't. So now I've figured out the ratios and the colorways and stuff like that. And also chosen a stitch that kind of looks a lot like the original knitting pattern. Well, some costume designer handed a bag of wool to a woman named Begonia Pope and basically said, make a scarf. Well, nobody expected that little miscommunication that would create a piece of Doctor Who legend that's still making fans lose their damn minds 40 plus years later. What started out as casual curiosity about Tom Baker's Fourth Doctor scarf quickly became full-on freaking obsession because this seemingly simple piece of knitwear turns out to be one of the most intricate and captivating elements in television history. We're talking about a costume element that accidentally became the defining visual of an entire era of television. It evolved through multiple incarnations and somehow managed to be both completely impractical and absolutely perfect. At the same time, it was a beautiful accident. The story behind the legendary scarf reads something like the Doctor himself might have just stumbled into the action. James Acheson, the costume designer who clearly didn't know jack all about knitting, knew everything about how to make television magic. He decided that Tom Baker's new Doctor needed a scarf. So he does what any reasonable person would do. He gathers up a massive bag of wool and ships it off to Begonia Pope. And honestly, could there be a more perfect name for someone who accidentally creates television history? Well, it's beautiful in its simplicity. Acheson apparently forgot to mention how long this scarf should be, or maybe he just figured it was obvious. Either way, Begonia Pope looked at all that wool and thought, well, I guess he means me to use all of it. The woman knitted up every single strand he had sent her, creating a scarf so ridiculously long that she claims it filled her entire front room. When Acheson saw what happened, he could easily have said, whoops, let's trim this down into something reasonable, but instead, the man had the genius to recognize comedy gold when he saw it. He kept the whole damn thing. creating what Tom Baker himself called a little piece of legendary costume. Sometimes the best creative decisions happen when you just roll with the happy accidents. The original scarf that debuted in an episode called Robot measured about 12 feet long, and that's not counting the tassels. If you put tassels on it, you can add another foot. By the time they were done stretching and wearing it through seasons 12 and 13, it had grown to around 14 feet of impractical magnificence. It was a very colorful thing, too. Her original colors were purple, camel, mustard, rust, gray, green, brown, and bronze stripes. A lot of the things that she used are not available to us today. But somehow it all kind of worked together in a way that shouldn't, but absolutely did. And this wasn't just one scarf that stayed the same throughout Baker's 7-season run. This thing had evolved into some kind of textile organism, growing longer and more complex as the years went on. What started out the original 12-footer quickly realized that they needed a stunt double for all the action scenes. It kind of makes sense because you don't want your lead actor getting strangled on his own costume while trying to save the universe. So they created a shorter, narrower version for the dangerous stuff, but it gets wonderfully ridiculous over time. This stunt scarf became the primary scarf, and then they attached it to pieces of the original to create what the fans lovingly call the super long scarf. By season 15, they'd created an alternate version based on the stunt duplicate with about 50% more stripes and mostly darker colors. The costume department was basically treating this scarf like a living document, constantly revising and expanding it. Seasons 16 and 17 saw them literally sewing the remains of the original scarf into the stunt duplicate, creating an even longer monstrosity that had to be patched and retasseled as it wore out from all the running around and saving planets. In season 18, that was Baker's final season, producer John Nathan Turner wanted to modernize the show, which led to complete costume redesign by Jane Hudson. Now, I'm sorry, was that June Hudson? Now, Hudson had complete permission to ditch the scarf entirely. It would have been the practical thing to do. Instead, she looked at this ridiculous piece of woolwear that had become synonymous with the character and said, "Nah, we're keeping it, but we're going to make it even more extra." So she created a new scarf out of chenille in burgundy and plum colors that stretched an absolutely bonkers 24 feet. I will make a pattern for that. How long you make it will be up to you. That's right, it was 24 feet. That's longer than most people's living rooms. It was the longest version of the scarf ever created, a final farewell that was somehow both elegant and completely over the top. The level of detail that the fans have put into analyzing and replicating the scarf borders on academic, and I'm here for all of that. We're talking about people who have created Pantone color guides, studied the exact knitting techniques, and debated the proper wool weight like they're discussing the Dead Sea Scrolls. The original scarf was likely made with DK wool using a slipped edge knitting technique. We don't have to do that in crochet. Our chain one at the end covers that. A detail that serious replicators note for authenticity. They use also what's called a garter ridge for 2 rows. That was for easier counting during the process because apparently even accidental television history needs some method to its madness. The colors have been analyzed under different lighting conditions because the studio made the scarf appear lighter than it actually was, leading to decades of debate about its true colors. The gray alone has been described as very warm gray, bordering on a deep taupe with a hint of purple. Wow. People have written dissertations in less detail than this color analysis, and don't even get me started on blocking techniques. Wet blocking could stretch a pure wool scarf by 40 to 50%. We sure as hell don't want to do that. But in the blocking, it did keep growing, and it also gave it that very distinctive drape. Now, in the crochet, we're probably not going to have to block it, but you can if you want to. And here's what makes it brilliant beyond just its visual impact. The writers actually made it functional. This wasn't just a costume piece that looked good. It was a tool the doctor used to solve problems and get out of trouble. And honestly, some of the ways it was incorporated into the action were pretty darn clever. The doctor used his scarf to defeat an automated sentry, trip various bad guys, including Count Frederico's executioner and even the master himself. He used it to pull around his robot dog K9, help Romana climb cliffs and lower himself down mine shafts. The thing became like a textile Swiss Army knife, always ready to save the day in the most ridiculous way possible. This practical use elevated the scarf from where the costume was to a typical character trait. It wasn't just something Tom Baker wore. It's something the doctor wielded. The length that made it impractical for normal wear made it perfect in all sorts of heroic sense. It became a piece of pop culture shorthand. You can reference that scarf in contexts that have nothing to do with science fiction, and people will know exactly what you're talking about. It has been parodied in The Simpsons, referenced in Big Bang Theory, and appeared in countless other shows and movies as a sort of shorthand for eccentric genius. Tom Baker said of it, "It was me, playing this kind of zany, benevolent alien, and that's what I am, I suppose, a benevolent alien." The scarf perfectly complemented what he called his bohemian appearance and anti-establishment style. It was visual rebellion wrapped in wool. Impractical, colorful, and completely unapologetic about who it was. Well, especially in the markets like the United States, where his episodes were broadcast most frequently, that impractical, long, multicolored scarf became an immediately recognizable figure that could sell the show without a single word of dialogue. You'd see the scarf on a TV guide photo and know exactly what you were in for. Now, even decades later, the scarf remains of cultural relevance. The 15th Doctor called it timeless and still in fashion in a comic book adventure. That's not just nostalgia talk, and that's recognition that some design choices transcend their original context and become genuinely timeless. The scarf represents willingness to embrace the absurd while never winking at the audience about it. Tom Baker wore that ridiculous thing with complete conviction, treating it like the most natural accessory in the world. The writers incorporated it into the action without making jokes about its length. Everyone involved committed to the bit so completely that what should have been a costume department mistake became a television legend. James Atchison could have trimmed it down and we'd never have heard about it. June Hudson could have eliminated it entirely, but she couldn't. Tom Baker could have refused to wear something so impractical, but instead everyone involved recognized that sometimes mistakes aren't mistakes. They're better than plans. The fact that we're still talking about this 40 plus years later, that new doctors are still referencing it, and that fans are still creating replicas of it with so much attention to detail, that's not just nostalgia. That's recognition of something genuinely special, a piece of design that captured lightning in a bottle and wouldn't let it go. In the end, that ridiculously long, multicolored scarf became exactly what the Fourth Doctor needed it to be, a perfect visual representation of a character who was brilliant, eccentric, and kind, and completely unafraid to take up all the space he needed in this universe. Sometimes the best costume choices aren't planned at all. They're just what happens when creative people are brave enough to say yes. How's it going? Are y'all about ready for me to cut you loose? Just a very quick little recap. You got your chart. Stick to the chart. Half doubles all the way across. You'll have 35 half doubles. Chain up 1 at the end. That's all you need to know. That's it. Nothing else to know. So I got all the way up to the 8 rows of pumpkin. Sides are even. I got quite a bit done. I'll tuck that in just a little bit. You know, I'm a fool with it till I get it how I like it. But that's it. So Let me know how it goes. Good luck. Tomorrow's another day and another planet to save. That's it for me tonight. I'll see y'all next time.